Quilting Celebrations with Patrick Lose is brought to you by The Warm Company, manufacturers of the most loved battings and double-stick fusibles for creative people. Janome, what's next? Superior Threads, all your favorite threads. Havel Sewing, cut it close with Havel Sewing. And Patrick Lose Studios, designs and inspirations for your quilting celebrations.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to Quilting Celebrations with Patrick Lose. I'm here with my friend Patty Connor from Samsara Design Studio, who's going to show us a project from this book called All Wool and a Yard Wide. This is a wool pillow project. Make sure you take a look for this book too. And Patty, I want you to jump right into the project and just tell me about what you're going to be doing here.
Okay, this is the pillow, and the original one is done on parchment colored Weeks Dye Works wool. And when I started doing my step outs, I didn't have any of this color. So I just did it on snow cream.
Sure.
And that's one of the things I want. I list all of my supplies, but if you have something else, go ahead and use it. If you don't quite have the color, I say just use what you have. But I really do love Weeks because everything matches. So all of the floss and everything goes together.
Just use your imagination and pick the colors that you like.
Okay, the first thing that I do when I do this is I take a piece of tracing paper, and it doesn't have to be anything fancy, just whatever you get from your kids' craft store or whatever. And I trace the design that I'm going to do onto this paper. And the reason I do that is then when I have cut out my linen, or wool, I will center this on here and pin it in place, and then I can slip pieces underneath and get them precisely where I want them to go. So that my design will match what I want. Otherwise, things tend to migrate really easily. So you will cut out a couple of 11-inch squares of wool out of the fabric, out of your Weeks fabric. And once you've cut this out, I cut those tabs off and cut out what I want. And so then I put the rest of it into a bag with the label so I know exactly what it is.
Oh, that's
because
great.
I have hundreds of these, and I will not remember every
I asked you
name.
before, and I'd like you to tell viewers too. So the reason that this works is because there is an air hole in this bag. So
this is a pattern bag, and it's made so that you can just stuff things in there, and you don't have to be really careful about getting the air out. So it's got a hole punch there. If you live in a really humid area, you can leave the top open. If you have a problem with moths, I would close it. I've never had moths come to my house because I have all this wool, so that's not a problem really. So it's just, you need to, otherwise you'll have this giant pile of wool and you won't know what color you have.
It's always good to have your stash organized.
Right.
Definitely.
So I've traced this, I've put it on here, and then I start putting my pieces on. One of the things I do is I do smaller pieces first before I do details on the smaller pieces before they get put onto the big piece of wool. So like the centerpiece I appliqued the green on there, and then I'm going around and doing decorative stitches. They're just straight stitches that go off the edge.
I thought they were blanket stitches. And I'm like, this is so much easier.
It is.
Anyone can do this.
It is. And they actually go off the edge beyond.
Right. Patty is an expert stitcher. I mean, it's not just that she does, projects from wool, or she has lots of quilting projects, but she's an expert at this hand stitching. And the project that you're doing today, it's so simple, and I think that was part of what attracted me. Anyone could sit down and do this.
You can, and this wool is so forgiving. If you are doing applique with woven cottons, you really need to get them really done well.
It's a tighter fabric.
Yes, and you have to tuck under the ends, and this is, there's no turn under.
It's a great way to learn applique, and then maybe you want to graduate to fabrics, or maybe not, or cottons, maybe not.
And I used to do cottons a lot, but this is just more my style. And
it's relaxing.
It is, and I was actually working on these on the airplane coming here. So
that's great.
I'm always last minute, but it's a small thing that you can have in your lap, and it doesn't take up space.
It's a conversation starter too.
Yeah, there's. My grandmother used to do that, so I'm like, thank you. But anyway, do those small things in your hand, and then put it on here. So for this one, the first thing I did, you generally work from the lowest layer up. So this is Bordeaux.
Like
it is Bordeaux.
Bordeaux.
And so that went down first, and then I put on the meadow green on the top. And then, because there's actually stitches along there, they don't need to be there. They're just decorative.
It's almost like you can't even see them though, because again, the wool is so forgiving that the stitches just sink into it if you want them to.
And I'm using Weeks floss, which matches.
Oh,
so
that's awesome.
They're dyed the same, and they're not, the floss and the wool take the dye slightly differently, so sometimes the colors aren't exact, but they are so
they
close.
Coordinate.
They are.
Even if they're not exact.
Yeah. And this is not like counted cross stitch. It's okay to put a knot in the back, because the wool will...
You don't want to see my counted cross stitch, I don't think.
The wool's not going to show anything, and so I've put just a single overhand knot in the end of the floss, and I'm just making more straight stitches. So they just come from one side to the other, and I don't cut them. I just keep on going up.
You could easily have this finished in an afternoon. I mean, just relaxing and stitching.
The original piece I did, I was having a deadline again, and I did it in the evening after dinner, and I had it done for the next morning.
Oh, sure.
So it's very simple, and you can do as much or as little handwork on here as you want. Okay, so I finished stitching to the end of this, and in the back I just tie a single knot. This is, it's thick enough that a single knot will do it. So then trim that off, you're ready to go. Now, I'm going to go ahead and do this. I put the squares on last, but I'm going to go ahead and do it so I can get those pins out of there.
Okay.
When I'm using, when I have to pin the things down, I use very fine dressmaker pins, because otherwise the wool distorts too much and it's hard to.
So that means you probably want a longer pin too, rather than like a little applique pin.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the main part is it is so slender. That's what makes it work
Applique
really
pins
well.
are really fine, but I'm afraid that if you put a short applique pin on there, it might bend the sides.
It might. So these are dressmaker pins. I don't know where I got them. So instead of stitching all the way around all these little squares, just take, this is 2 strands of white, it's a whitewash floss, and make an X. And that holds it down.
That's what made me think, when I saw this at Quilt Market in Houston, I thought those were little shell buttons from a distance, and I just love the look of that.
So just work on down. And it's just a trial and error thing, because you really can't know where you are. You just get one where you want it, pull it through. Make sure your floss stays just 2 strands. Don't let it build up, and just make X's. And you don't have to end at the end of it. I just go to the next one and drag that stuff over, which I would never do in cross stitch.
What's the, like you have 2 strands of floss, how does that equate to pearl cotton? Would that be like an 8?
No, it would be less.
Oh, it's less, okay.
The floss comes, it's stranded and there's 6 strands in it. And when you get it from Weeks, it's in one continuous 5-yard loop, and they do that for people that do punch needle. So what I do is I cut the whole skein apart into 1-yard lengths, because that's what I use. So you pull one of those out of there. You
use a yard at a time
I do.
In your needle? Okay.
When I cross stitch and when I do this, there's a lot of people that think that's too long, but this floss is such high quality that it doesn't.
It's not going to tangle on you.
It doesn't. Well, you still have to be careful, but it doesn't get thinner as you go.
Oh, I see what you mean. Sure.
And so if you want to, you tap on the end of the floss to get it to open up, so that you actually pull out 1 strand, and this just really slowly, so it doesn't tangle.
Wow. And that's not even, look at that.
And then another strand. I'm using 2, but you don't pull out 2 at once. You do 2 separately, and then lay them next to each other and smooth them out. And that's how you get, it doesn't tangle as much, and it's smoother and it relaxes.
I couldn't believe that.
No.
That's great.
And when I first started, I was like pulling them apart and sticking it in my mouth and trying to, you know, and so that works out really well. So
there's a picture to paint.
So, but I think people can relate. Everybody
Oh
did
yeah,
that.
I do. That's why I
So
laugh.
that works out.
I just learned something there.
So anyway, you would finish doing that. I'm not going to take the time
Right,
to
right.
go through. Okay.
I love
so,
the look of those little squares, though.
They do look
It makes
good.
the project, really.
All right. So I have not finished doing this, but I thought I would show it. It's just a stitch.
A straight stitch again?
It
That's not a
is.
blanket? Wow.
No. And if you've ever hemmed pants, that's basically what you're doing.
We don't admit that to people, though, that we do sewing like that.
I don't tell other people I do that, but I
Okay.
do it for myself.
And we can tell our viewers, but
I
we'll
still
keep
get
that amongst ourselves.
My son just brought me shorts. He said, "Mom, there's a hole in my pocket. Fix it." He said,
Really?
"Please." He
Okay,
said, "Please."
okay.
And the only reason I did it was because I actually had just uncovered a fusible patch. You know, those old patches
Sure.
I used to do, and so I knew exactly where it was. I'm like, okay, I'll do this. But otherwise, he knows better. So,
It's like asking Picasso to paint a garage, right?
however, I'm not above it. It's just,
No, no,
you know.
no.
But okay, so I come in and catch the edge. I don't want to be too close. It is felted, so it's not going to ravel, but if you get too close, it might pull out.
yeah.
So, and this is only one strand that I'm putting these down with, but you can use two if you want.
I mean, that almost looks like you're working with a really high quality felt, you know, not a woven wool, you know, that
Right.
it's really
But
beautiful.
I prefer this to felt. I really,
Felt is probably too dense for that.
yeah. This is just, it has a nice texture in hand, and the colors are fabulous.
And it remains soft, especially if you haven't used a fusible or
Right,
something
there's no
like that.
fusible in there. I don't know if we actually talked about that. The way I get the pattern is I trace onto freezer paper.
Okay.
I trace that after I trace the original piece, and I trace all the shapes under freezer paper, and I actually like make a mark up so that when I know which
You
is
know
up.
which, sure, that
and-
makes sense.
And for pieces underneath, I add a little bit because you can't ever get them to line up precisely. So that's how you do that. And then you cut these out and iron them onto whatever wool you've selected. And even though it's wool, I crank it clear up to the hottest linen setting, and I have steam because that really melts this enough to stick.
Right.
And
I always use the linen setting on wool,
Yeah.
always.
so you just press that on, let it cool, and you can cut out the shapes. So that's how I got those.
That's a great trick, too.
So-
I wouldn't have thought of the freezer paper for wool.
I think a lot of people do that. And Alice, my friend Alice, is the one who actually said, no, you should do it this way. Because I
Really?
used to trace them onto cardboard templates and trace around them. And that's
sure.
just,
Yeah.
there's no reason to do that. So anyway, that's how you go around.
It's so easy.
It is.
I think this would be a great project for a beginner to try working with wool
Absolutely.
applique.
Absolutely. So then you've got it all done. When you're finished, what I do is I take my my ruler and I try to like just make sure it's even. Go around and make sure this
Square
is
it up
centered
and-
because things scooch. So do that and then sew a backing fabric to it. Right sides together.
Both sides together, sure.
Sew around, leave a little opening in the bottom, and then stuff it and hand
Hand
close
stitch it. You won't even see it on that wool.
No, you
when
don't.
hand sew that.
There, I mean, it's barely visible right
Oh,
there.
wow. Yeah, that's great.
So
It almost makes me think if you had gone all the way around, that'd be beautiful to look at. I
might.
mean, look at the texture of that.
And
That's
I
great.
actually like when people put rickrack in there or some
Oh, yeah.
trim on the edge. It looks really nice.
Yeah,
So do as much or as little as you want, but it's easy.
very easy.
Let me show you one more thing about
Okay.
how I transfer the letters on.
Oh, sure, yeah.
This is my tracing paper. I lay it on there. This is just a regular pencil. And I will poke it through the paper.
That's what I do.
Of course, this doesn't want to do it.
Oh, great.
Anyway, poke
There we
through there
go.
and I twist it and it makes a mark that you can
Perfect.
see. So I don't make a lot of them. Like I'll go there.
We're using too fine of a lead, I think.
Yeah. So anyway,
But
once
there.
I have those marks, then I just kind of lightly connect them. And you don't want it too dark. I don't use a marker or anything.
Right, because
So
you're
just-
covering that. Is that a stem stitch?
It is,
Yeah, so
it
you're
is.
covering that anyway.
So, and this is number 5 pearl cotton, so it is thicker.
A good thickness.
And the needle that I use is called a chenille needle, and the reason I do that is because it has a long eye, so these things can fit, but it's got a sharp point. It's not like a tapestry needle that you would use for cross stitch. So to do that stem stitch, you just start. And the reason you use a bigger needle also helps this come through the fabric, so it doesn't distort the fabric. It makes a big hole so that can come through. So just go in a little ways, come back, pull that. Then you go a little bit further and come out at the same place where the previous stitch went in.
Yeah.
Well, just to this side of it. And do that all the way around, and that makes that stitch.
Yeah. Yours is a lot neater than mine, but I love it. This is a great project, honestly, for beginners that want to experiment with wool, and then on top of experimenting with wool, to get to use hand-dyed wool. It's just beautiful. Yeah.
It is.
So I hope you guys like the project. In the next segment, we're going to come back because I have some more questions, especially for Miranda, about the process of what she goes through to come up with this beautiful woolen thread. So join us on the next segment.
Quilting Celebrations with Patrick Lose is brought to you by The Warm Company, manufacturers of the most loved battings and double-stick fusibles for creative people. Janome, what's next? Superior Threads, all your favorite threads. Havel Sewing, cut it close with Havel Sewing. And Patrick Lose Studios, designs and inspirations for your quilting celebrations.